Release That Witch, Audiobook, Part 89.
Chapter 1233, Being Trapped. I see, Nightingale spoke after a moment of contemplation. Compared to building a brand new railway, it's much easier to build a road to connect the rivers. Railway construction needs and skillful workers, but everybody can build a regular road. Even the refugees can do it. In this way, we can save a lot of time. Exactly. This is another strength, Roland said in approval. As long as we plan it well, we'll alleviate the stress of the logistics department in 1 or 2 months. This is very important for us considering we have such a tight timeline. It appears that you do, sometimes, grasp the nature of the problem. Ha, of course, hang on, Nightingale said, and her smiles immediately faded out. What do you mean by sometimes? I can think, and I can help you with your work and cope with my exam. Although she looked pretty frustrated, her voice trailed off. Roland giggled involuntarily. Nightingale had to first make sure that she did not fall asleep before she set to study. Roland shoveled his eyes back to the map on the desk. If he wanted to connect the rivers in Grey Castle and the Kingdom of Dawn, the fastest way was to build a road in the eastern region near the Redwater River that ran all the way to the city of Evernight. The road should then wind toward the north, reach the windswept ridge, and finally connect the Sparkling River in the neighboring country. The Sparkling River originated from the Hermes Plateau and diverged at the capital city into 3 branches. 2 wider ones stretched away between the south and north of the Kingdom of Dawn and flew to the ocean. To further facilitate water transportation, the Moya family had dug out a canal running from the east to the west over the past 100 years, which not only boomed the business activities along the river but also provided a shortcut for Roland's road construction plan. With that being the case, Roland only needed to build 2 roads, one from the Sparkling River to the Northside River and the other leading to the Cage Mountain. In this way, there would be a passage connecting the 2 countries. Compared to a costly railway, the 2 roads were no longer than 200 kilometers put together, and all he needed to do was to set up 3 ports for freights. Since loaded trucks were heavy and could easily damage the road, particularly on rainy days, Roland decided to use mortar and cement to harden the road surface instead of gravels to avoid subsequent maintenance. The road, therefore, would be of the same quality as those in Neverwinter. Cement was now widely used in Neverwinter, but it was time-consuming to ship it to the Kingdom of Dawn, so Roland decided to produce cement locally. After finishing the drawing, Roland wrote a letter to the king of the neighboring country, Andrea's father, Horford Quinn. He was going to dispatch some technicians to the city of Glow and taught the 3 families in the king's city how to manufacture cement and assemble paddle steamers. Then they would be able to build a plant and mend the road for Neverwinter. Roland believed that the nobles would see the potential value of cement. With these 2 technologies, the Kingdom of Dawn could solve the transportation problem by themselves. Nevertheless, Roland planned to provide completed steam engines because none of the cities except Neverwinter in this era were industrialized. It would thus be meaningless to send over raw materials. Roland believed that the Kingdom of Dawn would take action immediately. If the red mist had already appeared at the crest of the impassable mountain range, Horford would receive the news soon. By that time, he would know what he should do. 2 days later, Roland saw the first batch of immigrants from the roof of the Miracle Building. Smoke coiled up into the air from the endless fleet and dropped a thick veil at the bank. People trotted on the trestle and off on the dock under the guidance of the police. A colorful sea of heads heaved up and down at the bank of the Redwater River. 50,000 people. That's the population of a whole city, Your Majesty, Barov commented in excitement, although also a little worried. I've never expected to see hundreds of thousands of immigrants from the Kingdom of Everwinter and Kingdom of Wolfheart coming to Grey Castle. If things go well, we'll soon reach our target of an increase of 200,000 people each year. Now, I should worry about your treasury. As well as public safety and urban management, the chief knight, Carter, rejoined a little apprehensively. Those immigrants may not acknowledge your authority. Out of safety concern, I suggest settling them down in a certain area so it would be easier to manage them. Then they'll never become true Grey Castle people, Roland said while shaking his head. If the police needs help, ask Barif. Punish the wrongdoers and reward those who make contributions. Send chronic offenders to the mine and subject them to heavy labor. I need workers, not imprisoned slaves. Without a doubt, the king's city would be more chaotic with such a huge influx of immigrants. This was an inevitable side effect of his immigration policy. Roland would not have carried out such a hasty plan had he had enough time. Now, the war was around the corner, so he had to implement the policy despite the potential problems it would bring. The benefits of an population increase overpowered its downside. For example, he could send 10,000 people out of the 50,000 new immigrants to the plants to increase the production of firearms. Then, the soldiers at the front would have more weapons and ammunition, as well as other new equipment. Now he had both manpower and technologies and could officially start the project for the cube-powered steam engines. Where am I? Valkyries woke up again and found herself in a snow-white room. The ceiling and the wall blinded her. There was a queer instrument ticking beside her. A transparent bag was hung above her, and the liquid in it dripped down the tube and slowly into her vein. There was so much information unfamiliar to her swarming into her head that for a moment, she could not give a proper response. She had never seen anything like this before. Everything was so different from what she were used to. For example, the white shirt she was currently wearing had pretty tight stitches, which was completely different from the clothes she usually wore. Valkyries closed her eyes and concentrated. No matter how strange the surrounding was, the only thing she could rely on was her power. Valkyrie's heart suddenly sank to the bottom. She noticed that she was not in her own body. Although this body looked exactly the same, the magic stone was gone. She would have died had the magic stone really disappeared. However, surprisingly, she felt fine. She could still sense the magic power slowly move within her body in an unfamiliar way. The murmur of the realm of mind was also gone. No matter how hard Valkyries tried to concentrate, there was no response. She even condescended to call upon the Sky Lord, but she heard nothing back from the latter. This meant that she was trapped. Chapter 1234, A Strange World. Yes, she was trapped. Valkyries now remembered that she had been delving into the depth of the realm of mind and tracking down a faint fluctuation. When she had crossed the borderline that separated the upper and lower level, her step had become heavier and heavier. The resistance from the realm of mind increased, and she felt something was dragging her down. It was her first time to come thus far, so she must be careful. If she got lost, she might be trapped here forever. Valkyries would have terminated this expedition and taken a break had she not sensed that the fluctuation she was looking for was getting closer. The entrance should be just around here. So she decided to dive deeper. Hacksword seemed not to be very impressed with her bathing in the red mist pond all day, especially when human beings had not realized that they had successfully transplanted the birth tower. On the other hand, Valkyries also wanted to know whether the human race had upgraded through the legacy shard. She had never anticipated, however, that the realm of mind suddenly quaked while she was trying to find the source of the fluctuation. She felt as if the muddy ground underneath suddenly cracked, sank, and formed a waterfall. She was immediately flushed down before she could realize it. When she woke up again, she found herself in this strange place. Beyond a doubt, this place should be a part of the realm of mind, but Valkyries was not sure whether it had anything to do with the male human she was searching for. Through the window, Valkyries could see a big city outside. Serried high-rises stretched away and disappeared at the end of the horizon, each as tall as the birth tower. Some were even taller than the king's presiding holy see. If this was that male human's territory, Valkyries did not understand why he had not noticed the presence of an intruder. The creator should have been omnipotent. Since Valkyries was the mortal enemy of the human race, the creator should have taken action by now. If a witch, by accident, trespassed the presiding holy see, death would probably be the kindest punishment inflicted upon her. The problem was that if this place had nothing to do with that male, then where was it? When Valkyries had sensed the quaver, she had felt the shockwave come from above. She was certain that she was on the right track, unless she had been searching in the wrong direction all along. Valkyries pondered for a while but could not find a satisfying explanation, so she put aside these questions. The most important task for her now was to adapt to this new body and find an opportunity to get out of this strange world. Valkyries was positive about one thing, that this new body was much weaker than her own. The wound on her legs had still not healed up yet, which indicated that she currently had little self-repairing ability. Her magic barrier stopped working. Valkyries had never been so weak for a long time. She felt as if she had traveled back to the time prior to her upgrade, when everybody could cause substantial harm to her. Fortunately, she could still summon magic power, which was an ability quite similar to Extraordinary's. While Valkyries was checking her body, there was a pattering of footsteps outside. The door was then pushed open, and two men entered smilingly. Valkyries almost wanted to throw herself onto them and rip them apart, but she suppressed the urge. This was not the real world. She reminded herself. It appeared that these people had saved her when she had lost consciousness. Perhaps, these people never knew such things as demons. If she acted recklessly, she would expose herself. "You look pretty well, Miss Valkyries," the female said as she lifted one corner of the blanket and examined her plastered legs. "Amazing. No wonder the pillar didn't wound your bones. You're a martialist. If I were you, my legs would have been smashed to pieces." "Is this what a doctor should say to her patient?" the male said as he glared at the female and then looked toward Valkyries. "I'm the doctor in charge here. You can call me Dr. Gao. According to the X-ray, you'll soon recover. Take a good rest, and I'm sure the injury won't affect your future contests. If you don't feel well, please don't hesitate to tell me." Valkyrie shook her head. She hardly understood anything Dr. Gao had said, so she resolved to remain silent. Valkyries also noticed that these human beings appeared to be pretty friendly to her. She was puzzled as to why these people did not view her as a person of another race. Even if they did not harbor hostility against her, how could they speak to her in such an amicable manner when there was such a drastic difference between the two races? Valkyries even noticed that the female was particularly interested in her. Her eyes were glued on her. "I'm glad you're well," the male named Dr. Gao said as he leafed through the brochure in his hand. "The association will come to visit the hospital this afternoon, and they'll also hold a meeting in the evening. I've already declined the request to attend the meeting for you. Those people are so insensible. They wanted you to sit the meeting through in your wheelchair. That's ridiculous. But I can't stop them from visiting you. This hospital is funded by the Martialist Association, so it's impossible for me to stop them. You just need to lie in bed." "Thank you," Valkyrie said in a way an ordinary man would normally speak in this situation. "You're welcome," the male said with a smile. "By the way, you must be bored. The association didn't send your cell phone here. Do you want to watch TV? Cell phone? TV? What were they?" Nonplussed, Valkyries did not answer. The doctor took her silence as a yes, so he picked up a square box on the nightstand, pointed it at a blackboard on the wall, and fiddled it. Soon, light escaped from the blackboard. "Now, you take a good rest," Dr. Gao said as he waved his hand and withdrew from the room with the female. Valkyries goggled at the screen and almost lost herself. How did they do this? The image on the blackboard changed. Everything was so lifelike. Valkyries would not have been so surprised had the blackboard been a magic artifact, but this object was non-magical. She could not sense any fluctuation of magic power from the blackboard. It took Valkyries a while to get used to it. She also discovered that the content of the television had something to do with the little square box. The image would change if she pressed the button on it. If her assumption was correct, these contents might be closely related to this world. This was an effective way to get to know about this world. While Valkyries was flipping through channels, she captured one strange word, the Martialist Association. Based on what the male had told her, she was also a member of the association, or more precisely, they assumed that she was a member of the association. She saw a crowded square on the television. The picture was shot from above. Perhaps someone videotaped the scene with some magic artifact like a stone of flight. This is the third day since the attack at the Prism City. Firefighters are still rescuing members and cleaning up the debris. The association has confirmed the death toll. The victims' identities still remain unknown at this point. During the whole rescue process, many martialists displayed courage and sense of responsibilities. They went down to the evacuation exits to look for those being trapped. The chief disciple of the Defender Rock, Miss Lan, was killed in action. When she entered Exit 4, she was attacked by the fallen evils. To protect her peers, Valkyries did not hear a single word said by the reporter. Her attention was caught by the image on the blackboard. Valkyries was shocked. Why do I see those strange and familiar faces in the realm of mind? Wasn't the Cloud School already disbanded? Chapter 1235, The Cloud School. Valkyrie shook her head and forced herself to calm down. She was certain that the Cloud School was gone. After their kind occupied the northwest of the Land of Dawn, Valkyries visited the mountain where the school used to be situated every 100 years and would stay at the ruins of the school building for a couple of days every time she went there. Because she used to be one of the students in the school. She had learned how to connect to the realm of mind and also about human beings on that mountain. Her teacher was the Transformer, Heath Talise, who was also an upgraded. Heath Talise was not exceptionally powerful. In fact, she was even weaker than a relatively strong inferior demon. Because of this, the clansmen treated her with utter contempt. However, Valkyries knew that the upgrade ceremony had nothing to do with fighting capacity. Heath Talise had successfully merged with magic stones 3 times, and she was a genius upgraded in every aspect. As her title suggested, the Transformer had obtained the ability to transform after merging with her second magic stone. Hence, she rarely revealed what she truly looked like. Most of time she disguised herself as a human. Since she could speak the human language fluently, many people would think that she was human at first. Lan on the television was the identity she had used most often. Valkyrie stared at that familiar face, and her thoughts strayed back to 1,000 years ago. Although the woman's countenance and clothes were slightly different, Valkyrie's was sure it was the same face. If the founders of the Cloud School were aliens among humans, then the Transformer was an alien among her clan. Heath Talise did not really care about the fighting capacity that her magic stones would afford her, but she had a devouring curiosity about everything unknown. The Transformer was also the first person that made the initial contact with the Cloud School. At that time, rumors about the Battle of Divine Will had been spread throughout the whole clan, and they had viewed the mankind on the Land of Dawn as their potential enemies. Valkyries was very grateful to her first teacher who had taught her so many things. She did not disdain Heath Talise because the latter was not good at fighting. Valkyries knew very well that the Transformer had had a more profound understanding of the realm of mind as well as the origin of magic than anyone else in the clan. She had written dozens of books, half of which provided guidance to the later generations and helped them go through the upgrade ceremony. She was what human beings called a mentor for most of the clansmen. In fact, the Transformer was probably the first person who had made an attempt to merge with 4 magic stones. Had she succeeded, she would have become the first senior lord of the clan. At that time, there had been very few inferior demons, let alone a senior lord. Unfortunately, the Transformer had failed. She had been devoured by her own magic power, without leaving the slightest trace behind her. Valkyries remembered that day because she had been right beside the Transformer at that time. She had witnessed how the Transformer gradually had fallen apart and collapsed. That was also why Valkyries felt that the Lan on the television was a little unfamiliar. She had never seen 2 people that looked so alike over the past 1,000 years. Valkyries had asked the Transformer why she wanted to present herself in this way, for she believed that the face she had created did not belong to any prominent historical figures. Heath Talise's answer, however, was incomprehensible. She said this was the face of an apostle. As for who the apostle was, the Transformer did not know either. When she dived into the realm of mind, she sometimes could feel an entirely different strand of mind. It was whispering, but she had never officially met it. Nevertheless, the Transformer later remembered what it looked like. The Transformer also said that if she could stabilize herself in the chaotic realm of mind, she would be able to connect to that whispering sound. Unfortunately, she was not powerful enough to do so. Valkyries did not understand what that meant at that time, for she had just upgraded and known nothing about the realm of mind. In other words, the Transformer was a pioneer in the exploration of the realm of mind. The king, as a matter of fact, had not marked out its own territory in the realm of mind until the night before the second battle of divine will. Valkyries had also asked the king whether he had seen that apostle, but the king denied. Therefore, there could be two possibilities. One was that this world belonged to the apostle Lan. However, according to the news on the television, Lan was dead. That did not make sense, for the creator of a territory would never die or leave the realm of mind. The other was that the Transformer had returned to the realm of mind before being devoured by her own magic power and had thereby created her own territory. This theory might explain why the presence of Lan did not raise any suspicions, but it failed to explain the strange surroundings. Valkyries had wanted to leave this weird place as soon as possible in the beginning, but now she changed her mind. She was concerned about what the Transformer had said when the latter had failed her fourth upgrade. The Transformer had said that even if they won the battle of divine will, they would not gain the divine domain. Valkyries wanted to know what had made her mentor say this. Perhaps, this was an opportunity for her to find out the reason. Roland yawned as he drove his minivan on the second ring highway. Although he pressed hard on the gas and the engine also roared, he still fell behind from other vehicles. "What's wrong? You didn't sleep well?" Garcia, who was now sitting in the passenger seat, asked. For some reason, Roland felt that Garcia had become much more polite to him since she had stayed over at his place that night. "It's my day off. I plan to sleep in. Thanks to the association, I have to get up early again," Roland complained, unable to help himself. He was very tired after the meeting regarding the immigration policy. As time in the dream world traveled 3 times faster than that in the real world, he had decided to take a good rest in his dream. It would not only save him a lot of time but would also give the tequila witches an opportunity to enjoy themselves. Now, the witches could have fun on their own. Also, apart from entertainment, the ancient witches also shouldered the responsibility of searching for the magic creatures that had appeared during the erosion. Roland remembered that Lan had told him that the god was watching this world. To eliminate the threat and reach God's territory, the most effective way was to kill the fallen evils and use their power to expand the dream world. However, the reality was always cruel. Garisha had called him at noon and informed him that he had to visit the survived association members in the hospital. All the celebrated martialists and the executives would be there. Roland had intended to decline, as he had thought it was simply Garcia's own idea. He had not anticipated, however, that it was a request from the association and that the association had appointed him, a licensed hunter, instead of Garcia. The association wants to re-establish confidence in the Prism City after this massive attack, Garcia commented while raising her brows. "I believe what they really plan to do is to hold a conference in the evening." Roland fell silent. It was not enough to calm down the public by just visiting patients. What they needed to do now was to display their power and fight back. In consideration of that, the meeting in the evening must have something to do with the magic creatures. This provided Roland with a perfect opportunity to conduct his own search. Chapter 1236, Striking Similarities. About 20 minutes later, Roland reached his destination. He looked around but did not find any building that resembled a hospital. Instead, what he saw were several splendid, magnificent modern edifices. "Right here," Garcia said with a nod. "Are you sure?" Roland asked a little suspiciously as he drove toward the entrance, and then he noticed a name plate that read, Green Meadow Sanatorium. "Of course. Everybody was as surprised as you when they first came here." A few burly guards wearing sunglasses and suits soon approached them and surrounded the car. One of them knocked on the window and said, "Sorry, this is a private premise. You can't park here." Roland twitched his lips. Oi, why was he always treated as crap? He was not here to park the vehicle but to visit patients. What was the problem with driving a minivan? When Roland was about to display his hunting license, Garcia rolled the window down and handed them a card. "It's a new vehicle, so we haven't registered it yet. Please register it." The guards was stunned for a moment before they took the card and cast a few suspicious glances at the car. They then returned to the monitoring room. When they came out again, they spoke to them in a completely different manner. "My apology, Miss Garcia. You registered another car before, so we... Isn't it normal to switch a car?" Garcia interrupted him politely. "Yes, of course," the guard agreed immediately and then looked at Roland. "May I know who this gentleman?" "My chauffeur." There was an awkward silence. It was a few minutes later that the chief finally realized his mistake and said, "I see. I'll add the new license plate for you." A moment later, the gate was open, and Roland released the clutch and shuffled his vehicle into the sanatorium. He could see the incredulous look on those guards' faces. A marshalist who asked her chauffeur to drive a battered minivan. Garcia was probably the most shabby marshalist they had ever known. "I thought you never lied." "That's because you don't know me," Garcia returned while shrugging. "I'm not that inflexible. It doesn't hurt to lie a little bit here and there. Plus, you're a member of the association. You just haven't got your identity card yet. The hunting license doesn't work? Licensed hunters should keep their identity confidential, although there are a few exceptions. It's the total opposite of celebrated martialists." Garcia said solemnly, "The hunting license does show that the association trusts you, but it also means a high risk. Many licensed martialists who exposed themselves have been besieged by fallen evils. This meant that if he revealed his identity as a licensed martialist, many fallen evils would come after him. However, for the safety of Zero and other residents in the apartment building, Roland thought he'd be better not do so. After his meeting with Lon, he could not view people in the dream world as mere fictitious characters anymore. Roland found the sanatorium was well facilitated. It was not very large, but it basically had everything, including a handsome garden, waterfalls, and bridges. There were also signs that pointed out the direction to the hot spring, the swimming pool, and the golf court. It was more like a luxurious resort than a sanatorium. Roland was deeply impressed. Even though he was now the king of Grey Castle, he had never thought of building a hospital like this. The hospital building was at the center of the sanatorium. Its shiny, sparkly glass wall reminded Roland of a high-end hotel. Roland and Garcia went into the hall, and soon a brawny man strode up to them. He was around 40, with dark skin, his martialist cloak whipping behind him. Roland immediately sensed his force of nature when the martialist was still around 10 meters from him. "This is my master's master," Garcia said in a low voice and then bowed her head. "Mr. Defender." "I'm sorry about Lon," Rock said heavily as he slightly crouched down and patted Garcia on the shoulder. "It was my fault." A little downhearted when hearing Lan's name, Garcia shook her head and said, "This wasn't your fault, sir. She always said to me that a martialist should devote himself to fighting the erosion. If he's scared, he doesn't deserve to be an association member." "You're a good student," Rock sighed. "Don't worry. The invaders will pay for that. I'm also willing to help fight the erosion." Rock nodded in approval before he rose and looked toward Roland. "You should be that famous fallen evil hunter, Mr. Roland. Nice to meet you." "I'm one of the 4 defenders of the Prism City, Rock." "Nice to meet you," Roland returned courteously and shook Rock's hand. "I have to thank you for easing the tension between the traditional and modern martialists," Rock said frankly. "I hope you could still continue to protect this world." "The honor is mine," Roland said resolutely. He could not tolerate anybody that dared to destroy his dream world. Roland's promise greatly cheered Garcia up. She was very proud that Roland had finally decided to take some social responsibilities. The visit started at 3 o'clock. There were around 20 people, all led by Rock. Apparently, not all the executives of the Prism City attended this event except a few representatives, including the celebrated martialist Fei Yuan. If truth be told, Roland was a little afraid of that genius girl. He remembered that during the joint mission last time, he had asked Ling to knock out all the survivors. However, Fei Yuan overheard their conversation and started to suspect his true identity. Roland had resolved to deny the fact, but to his surprise, Fei Yuan did not ask him about anything. Yet Roland was certain that she still remembered that incident. Therefore, he managed to keep a distance from Fei Yuan and remain silent. Fortunately, Fei Yuan was very popular and was always surrounded by a lot of people, so she did not get a chance to speak to Roland. They shook hands with patience and said a few encouraging words. Since Garcia was not with Roland, and he was just a newbie in the association, few executives knew him. As such, Roland simply followed the others and waited to be introduced. This was probably also the association's intention of bringing him here. The next patient is Valkyries, the doctor said as he peered down the list. She was severely injured. We should have let her rest, but since you're already here, let's say hello to her. Please keep quiet after you get in. We will. We believe that the health of the association member is the most important, Rock said as he gave a nod of approval and then pushed open the door. There was only one patient in the room. The room was a lot larger than Roland's apartment and could easily accommodate 20 people. Roland was the last to enter, and he waited to shake hands with her as usual. However, Roland was shocked when he saw her. It was a familiar face. The patient has thin, slender brows, a pair of cold eyes, a tall nose and beautiful lips. It was a beautiful and delicate face, even though her skin was blue. In fact, she looked even more attractive with pale blue skin. For quite a while, Roland stood rooted the ground. Then, he started to search his memories. He remembered the memory fragment in the apartment building. It recorded an upgrade ceremony held in a demon city, and the host was exactly this Valkyries. Roland had almost thought that the senior demon had infiltrated the dream world and invaded this world through the memory fragment. Shocked and dismayed, Roland studied the patient attentively and then found that she was a little different from the person he remembered. The biggest difference was that the patient in front of him did not have a third eye on her forehead. Chapter 1237, Observation. Roland was positive that the senior demon he remembered was, at that time, standing on a platform and teaching two upgraded demons fighting techniques. Her white muslin clothes swirling behind her formed a glaring contrast with the churning red mist pond down below, and her third eye on the forehead was glistening. He would never forget such an incredible scene. Although the patient did not have that distinctive third eye, she, for some reason, resembled that senior demon. Roland was thus aroused by this demon martialist named Valkyries. When it was his turn to shake hands, Roland did not leave immediately but stopped at her bedside. Are you living in the modular apartment? Everyone, who was about to withdraw from the room, was all taken back as Roland spoke. Valkyries remained expressionless. After a moment of reflection, she shook her head. Roland remembered that the female demon was actually a lot older than Zero, so she should not be one of Zero's captures. Do you have a twin sister by any chance, or someone who looks like you? Roland pursued as he pointed at his own forehead. For example, someone with an eye on her forehead? The crowd was stirred. The defender coughed in embarrassment and reminded promptly, Mr. Roland. Just a minute, Roland said as he waved his hand. You just reminded me of someone I know. Valkyries spoke in the same indifferent manner, no. How could that be possible? I've never seen anyone on the Kargard Peninsula who has a third eye, someone mumbled. There are people who have 3 fingers though. All right. Roland conceded but suddenly burst out boldly, Sharita. Valkyries, however, did not respond at all as though still in a daze. If Valkyries was a demon from the other world, she should have understood the demon language and had some reaction. It appeared that she really had nothing to do with that senior demon Roland knew. Roland shrugged, extended out his right hand and said, "I hope you feel better soon, return to the association, and fight the erosion together." She hesitated for a second and slowly stretched out her hand. The moment the two hands touched each other, Roland could not help uttering a surprised exclamation. The defender asked a little irritably, "What's the matter?" "Her hand is so cold, and a little wet as well." The onlookers guffawed. Roland could hear them comment derisively under their breath. Frivolous. Why did they pick such a brainless young man as the representative of the traditional martialists? There. The patient needs some rest. Let's visit the next one, the doctor said while shaking his head. What a mess. Roland shrugged. As the creator of the dream world, he did not really care about what other people thought of him. Since he could not get anything out of Valkyries, there was no point in continuing to stay here. He thus cast Valkyries one last glance and left the room. Valkyries was still in a shock after everyone left. She had just experienced the most difficult 15 minutes in her life. She had never thought that one day, she would exercise all her effort just to keep her face straight. It had almost cost all her energy. When that man came up to her, Valkyries felt all her blood within freeze. She would never forget that person. In the memory of the silent disaster, she had seen the exact same person stand on the other side of the legacy shard, watching the silent disaster being besieged by tentacles. She had not only been watching but also experiencing it herself. Therefore, she had also been somewhat affected by the silent disaster's emotions. As Valkyries had also been quite shocked and flustered at that time, she immediately associated Roland with the man in the silent disaster's memory when she saw him. Her previous assumptions were all wrong, and she had to admit that there was a third possibility. The quaver of the realm of mind told her something. She had been on the right track, and this world was created by that man. In other words, Roland was the creator of this territory. Had she met Roland in the real world, she would have immediately killed him. Like most of the upgraded demons, Valkyries also possessed extraordinary fighting capacity. No matter how powerful Roland was, she would make every effort to finish him. Nevertheless, things were a little different in the realm of mind. According to the king, nobody could kill him in his own territory. The king was an omnipotent and omniscient sort of existence that was almost like God to her. The king could be exaggerating, but Valkyries did not dare take a chance. She knew very well that she could encounter something worse than death. If Roland also had the ability to probe into her memories, the information she knew may jeopardize her entire clan. Therefore, she must be extra cautious when dealing with such a tough enemy. Fortunately, everything was still uncertain. Valkyries could tell that Roland was also in the process of figuring out her true identity. He did not have terrifying perspicacity like the king. Valkyries was dimly aware that Roland had seen her somewhere. Although she did not know how, his active demeanor told her that he remembered her. Most likely he had met her in the other world. Otherwise, he would not have asked her whether she had seen anybody with a third eye. The third eye on her forehead was actually the magic stone she had obtained during her third upgrade. Also, the word Sharita meant hero in the ancient language. Valkyries stretched out her hand and studied it up and down. She thought of the moment Roland had touched her hand. Her breath had almost stopped when Roland had uttered the exclamation. Luckily, she had successfully fooled him. Valkyrie still remembered the purpose of this trip. It was not only a challenge but also an opportunity. She had easily found the key person in the human race. As a male, he had inherited the legacy shard and also repelled the silent disaster with his mind. Beyond a doubt, this man possessed a lot of information that the clan did not know. She must get to the bare truth of it. Valkyries was sure that this man created this world to achieve something, just as the king created the presiding holy see to better manage his subordinates. She sniffed conspiracies here from the words fallen evils, fight and erosion. Therefore, she must figure out what kind of schemes this man was planning in the realm of mind. The conference that the doctor had mentioned might provide her a glimpse of what was going on. Valkyries clenched her fist at this thought. Roland, right? Now, I remember you. Chapter 1238, An Army of One Person. The conference was held in the hall of the sanatorium. Almost all of the professional martial artists were invited. However, Roland noticed that there were only about 300 people attending the meeting, which was significantly lower than the number registered in the Prism City. Apart from those who were injured or killed during the battle, some people had cold feet after the massive outbreak of the erosion. They were probably amateur martial artists who had recently joined the association. Garcia denounced such cowardice and believed that it was an insult to their awakened forces of nature. Those people would pay for their cravenness when the fallen evils completely overpowered human beings. Roland consoled Garcia, but he knew the Martial Artist Association was a relatively loose organization. In a modern society like the Dream World, the Martial Artist Association had no authority to bind the martial artists and ask them to tag along. Roland had anticipated what direction this meeting would go into. The defender, Rock, briefly explained the current dilemma the association was facing. After the attack at the Prism City, more fallen evils attacked the Awakened. Although there was no solid evidence at this point, it appeared that the new enemy that appeared in the erosion had the ability to control fallen evils. This meant that the war would enter a new stage. The Martial Artist Association would organize people and repel the fallen evils more systematically. In the meantime, the fallen evils had also come up with plans to kill martial artists. The situation for human beings was now very critical. Rock thus suggested that all the martial artists, both official members and newbies, should stay here in this sanatorium until order was re-established in the Prism City, as the sanatorium would afford some protection from their enemies. He also expressed his wish that all the invited martial artists should realize the precarious condition they were currently in and united to fight this battle together. This was a perfect way to raise the morale among the martial artists. Roland believed that once this information spread, some hesitant amateur martial artists would probably return to the association. Whether or not all the people came back depended on the outcome of the battle. If the fallen evils outstripped the association, more people would probably choose to flee. It was extremely difficult to re-establish confidence. As Roland had expected, Rock started to discuss the countermeasure. One strategy was to send for the martial artists from other cities to solve Prism City's lack of manpower. Secondly, the martial artist contest should continue, in order to attract more fallen evils. The government and the executives of the association had already approved this plan. Once the enemy appeared, they would face the wrath of the defender and the martial artists. Thirdly, the association would set up a patrol team to prevent the fallen evils from attacking innocent citizens. Therefore, the martial artists would be divided into several groups, each of which being responsible for defending one area. In this way, they could immediately support each other in the event of an emergency and could also besiege the enemy once they received information from the intelligence agency. The preliminary counterattack plan was quite conservative, considering that they lacked sufficient information. The leader of each group could select their own team members, and a heated discussion immediately swept over the hall. Roland did not want to be assigned to any team. In a sense, he himself was an army, and he did not want anyone to interfere with his magic core collection plan. Fortunately, few people in the association knew him, so nobody asked him to join their team. Until Fei Yuan walked up to him and offered an invitation. In fact, as the most popular martial artists, Fei Yuan only invited 2 people. But Roland turned her down without the slightest hesitation. Everyone dropped their jaws, including Garcia. She asked Roland to think it over. It appeared that even self-disciplined Garcia spoke highly of this girl. It took Roland a while to convince Garcia that he'd be better off fighting alone. The best proof was his previous feats and his hunting license. The only thing that Roland was concerned about was that the other person Fei Yuan invited was the demon martial artist, Valkyries. It was 10 p.m. when Roland returned to his apartment. After Zero went to bed, Roland entered the second floor of the Rose Café through the side door of the warehouse. More than 50 tequila ancient witches bowed to him and paid him the highest respect. This was the first time that so many witches had come to the dream world. The room was packed. Back in the Union Age, a team of 50 combat witches would have been sufficient to conduct a small battle. Any luck? Roland looked toward Faldy. Yes, the flies released by the bug nest sensed a few disappearing magic reactions, Faldy replied as she scrolled down the cell phone screen and showed Roland the map. She was not used to using the digital map, but somehow she managed it. Normally, this indicates that there are god stones of retaliation around there, or that our target can hide its magic power. If neither of the two applies, then it would mean that the target is dead. But there's no god stone of retaliation in the dream world, and the force of nature isn't as diverse as witches' abilities, Roland said. That's right. So we assume that the fallen evils fought with the awakened martial artists. Somebody died and their cores were taken away, Faldy replied while nodding. Based on the direction of the magic reaction, they probably went here, she pointed at a pier on the inner river. It appeared that the riverbank was always the first choice of locations to commit a crime. Since my flies can't go that far, I contacted Ling for further investigation. She told me an hour ago that she found many fallen evils. Well done, Roland said with a faint smile. This was the reason he did not need the support of the association. The Tequila Witches could locate the enemies and kill them on their own. I believe that you're all ready. Your Majesty, please issue your command, the witches chorused. Their morale was high after they had had a good time during the day. For them, fighting was another way to savor their past. In addition to enjoying food, using magic was extremely joyous for them. Everyone, ready, go! Roland ordered briskly. Yes, Your Majesty. Chapter 1239, Two Options. The port was only around 15 kilometers from the apartment. To avoid unwelcome attention, all the witches dispersed and headed in different directions. Roland was the last to set off. He drove his shabby minivan out of the residential area, with Phyllis and Faldy sitting at the rear. He had upgraded their equipment after the joint mission organized by the Martial Artist Association. Although the equipment was not as advanced as that distributed by the association, the appliances he had bought from the market were also quite a good alternative. The walkie-talkies he had bought from the website were equipped with Bluetooth microphones, which enabled the witches to communicate with each other within 5 kilometers. In reality, however, due to the interference of surrounding buildings and the complicated electromagnetic field, the communication was only effective when the witches were no more than 2 kilometers from each other. Since the speakers were less than 200 yuan, and he could receive a discount if he placed a bulk order, Roland decided to equip each of the ancient witches with a walkie-talkie. At least, the walkie-talkie was more convenient than a cell phone, and it attracted less attention of passers-by. Roland often saw in a movie where an unexpected call jeopardized the whole mission. He felt it not only stupid but also unrealistic. He definitely did not want to make the same mistake. Faldy, who had the ability to track people down, naturally became the key liaison person. Your Majesty, Betty's team has reached the port and met up with Ling. Ask them to hide themselves first until the rest of the team arrive, Roland said without looking backward. Okay. Donnan's team is still on the way and they'll be there in 5 minutes, but she doesn't have much money. Ask them who has extra to give to Donnan. Hold on. Donnan says that the driver has overheard their conversation and agreed to give them a ride for free. All right then. Roland said as he rolled his eyes. Why did nobody give him a free ride? 5 seconds after Faldy hung up, Roland's phone rang again. Your Majesty, Twinkle says she has to take a detour. It looks like that she's not going to the port. Roland frowned and asked, where is she? Before he finished, the phone was hung up abruptly, and Roland heard a loud bang on the other end of the line. Then there was a series of noises. Everything fell silent afterwards. Roland massaged his temple and said, well, ask her to take another taxi. Remember to avoid the surveillance camera. Got it, Your Majesty, Faldy promised. Around an hour later, all the witches reached the port. the team that arrived first had already started to eat sunflower seeds. Fortunately, the fallen evils had used the port as their temporary headquarters and did not notice the presence of the witches. They would have probably fled had this been a running fight. Roland suddenly had an urge to purchase more minivans to avoid such embarrassment. He cleared his throat and asked Ling, "What are the fallen evils doing?" "Your Majesty, the fallen evils are all in the loading area. There are more than 30 of them. Some of their scouts are on the iron boxes outside. We could easily pass them unnoticed under Donnan's veil of invisibility. The lighting condition is pretty good in the area close to the inner river. I didn't want to get too close to it, so I just took a look at the distance. Most of the fallen evils are there, but they could go anywhere. If we fight, I can't guarantee that we could capture every one of them." Ling's ability was to be fused with shadows, and she could hide herself perfectly at night just like Nightingale. In other words, she was the best scout. Roland said thoughtfully, "Well, in that case, let's lure them out and kill them. Entice them away from the river bank so that they can't flee by water, and then we can surround them." "It seems feasible in theory, but how to lure them away?" Phyllis asked. Roland smiled and pointed at himself. "I've heard that the fallen evils are attacking martial artists. They have no reason to let me go." After all the witches disappeared in the darkness, Roland revealed himself and strolled to the dump site, as though he was simply a resident who happened to be having a walk here. The dump site was dead quiet. The pattering of his footsteps and the humming of insects with which the silence teemed became extremely audible. Piles of boxes loomed against the soft glow of yellow lights. It appeared that nobody would come to this deep, desolate labyrinth of boxes at this hour. Donnan reminded the rest of the team over the cheap walkie-talkie that there were a few fallen evils lurking at the port. Apparently, the scouts of the fallen evils noticed Roland's force of nature and notified their peers. To Roland's surprise, the fallen evils did not attack him immediately but watched him amble around the port for a few minutes. Then, suddenly, the whole port area was as bright as day when the lights at the dump site were turned on. In the blinding light, Roland saw a dozen people slowly reveal themselves from the shadow. After his eyes were adapted to the dazzling light, he found himself surrounded by the fallen evils. The man, who appeared to be the leader, was wearing a mask with strange patterns on it. He stood out from all the other fallen evils. Roland noticed that his mask looked like a gate that was about to burst open. There were also two men standing next to the leader, who did not look like ordinary fallen evils, for their eyes had yet slid out of focus, and they were wearing the clothes distributed by the Martial Artist Association. "Good evening, poor man," the leader said in a surprisingly polite tone. "I don't know what brought you here, but you should know that you have no chance to escape. Rather than waste your time and energy, I would recommend you to first listen to me." Roland looked around and saw that there were fallen evils in all directions. "Don't be afraid. I don't want to kill you. On the contrary, this may be a very rare opportunity. I just came to this world and I need your help," the man said as he extended out his hands. "Don't refuse it right away. Please let me introduce myself. I'm the ambassador of God, Alpha, from what you call the erosion dot." Roland should have pretended to be frightened so that they would put their guard down. However, for some reason, Roland had an urge to punch the man in his face and shatter his triumphant, courteous smile. "So, you're the monster that invaded the Prism City?" "Invasion isn't the exact word, because this place belongs to God," Alpha said placidly. "Now it's time to return it. Look, lost man, the so-called martial artists will eventually be defeated and return to nothingness. It's more advisable to pledge fealty to God. I know it's hard for you to understand now. We have plenty of time to discuss the true nature of this world. I can show you the benefit you could possibly gain from this deal, apart from those empty promises. I can show you power," the man said while sticking out one finger. Soon, a flicker of red light ignited his fingertip, and Roland sensed a great fluctuation of magic power. "I can give this power to you, and you'll become much more powerful." "Mr. Apostle isn't lying," two men beside the leader rejoined. "We were just awakened, and now we feel that we have tons of energy." And you won't lose your mind either like those fallen evils. What if I decline? Then I'll have to turn you into one of those monsters. Although they're relatively weak, they obey me, Alpha threatened while shrugging. You can choose between the truth and power and being reduced to an unconscious monster that has an insatiable desire for the force of nature. You know which one is a better choice. Your Majesty, everyone is ready, Faldy whispered over the walkie-talkie. Roland twitched his lips and said, then let me tell you what the true nature of this world is. I create this world, and I won't give it to anyone. So, you have two options. One is that you give me your cores and die here. The other is that I kill you, and it'll take me some extra time to collect your cores. Which one do you choose? Stupid man, the martial artists who had betrayed the association hollered. You can kill us just by yourself? No, haven't you noticed that you've been surrounded? Roland said and snapped his fingers. Kill them. Chapter 1240, The Witch's War. Huh? Surrounded? Stop acting. Sir Alpha can sense every single fluctuation of the force of nature. Before the martial artists could finish, a flying box hit him right in the nose. He was thrown into the air and flew backwards, and he stopped dead. Another traitor gaped at the witches who came out all of a sudden from all directions. Some came down from the sky and some from underneath, but most of them just came out of nowhere, as though they had been waiting for them for quite a long time. This did not make any sense. Those women were no more than 10 meters from him. Even if they did not possess the force of nature, he should have heard their breath and footsteps. Why did the scout not alarm him beforehand? But he had no time to think it over. Instantly, the two parties started to fight. The quiet port was stirred. Ling was hiding in the shadow. Light and shadow always came hand in hand. Although the dump site was lit by the street lights, the shadow cast by the boxes created a perfect hiding spot for her. She had nailed her target already. Those fallen evils at the high point, which cast a long shadow on the ground and were fused with the darkness, gave her a perfect opportunity to launch an attack. If someone took a peek at Ling from behind, he would be totally shocked. Ling's body had merged into the shadow in the entirety, with only half of her head poking out. Several bubbles escaped from her nostrils silently. Ling liked submerging into shadows. It was a warmer and more comfortable sensation than bathing in a hot spring. She had thought that she would never be able to have this pleasure again after turning into a god's punishment witch, until Phyllis had informed her of this incredible world a year ago. It was a world of wonder that could bring her back to the past. Ling had fallen in love with this world the first time she had visited it. King Roland had transformed from a mortal with a strong personality into the Chosen One, whose authority could not be challenged, despite that he could not activate the instrument. Ling, Pasha and Celine always nagged Roland to take them to the dream world. Ling had also persuaded Roland to pick her as the guardian of the 3 witches who were sent to school. Ling knew that she had demons to kill, but it did not hurt to relax herself every now and then. Anyone who attempted to cause His Majesty harm or destroy the dream world was deemed as the mortal enemy of the Tequila Witches. As soon as the command was issued, Ling rose out of the shadow like a ghost and dived a dagger into one fallen evil's chest. Ordinary weapons could not fatally wound a fallen evil. Therefore, she had to also inject magic power into it. Ling could feel the fallen evil's energy become unstable. It seemed that the two powers were interfering with each other. This proved His Majesty's theory in a way: the force of nature and magic power were essentially the same thing. They were both from the erosion. Ling would only need to take out the corrupted core before the fallen evil collapsed into a pulp. The moment that fallen evil fell, Ling flew several meters, past a few boxes, and landed behind another fallen evil. The fight was fierce below. Soon, she eradicated all the scouts. Ling stood on the highest point of the dump site and watched the battle from above. All the witches were as powerful as 400 years ago. In fact, they became even faster after receiving intense training after becoming God's punishment warriors. Nevertheless, Ling was more pleased with the high morale than their progress in fighting skills. Betty's immense strength made her temporarily a transcendent. She held an iron box single-handed and pushed her way through a group of fallen evils. Twinkle and Phyllis were still the best partners. Every time Twinkle blinded their enemies with her ability, Phyllis's blade claws would reach the vital parts of the enemy's body. Donnan and Rother also did a wonderful job. Ling thought of the fierce battle back in Tequila Age. She cast a glance at Roland. Perhaps, Roland did not even realize that the dream world did not only provide the witches with mundane pleasures but also alleviated their stress. They had gone through the darkest time of their life in the several hundred years after the fall of the 3 holy cities and the collapse of the Union. Everybody invested all their strength in adapting to their new bodies. The loss of sensations made them gradually forget about life enjoyment. Since they had no clues as to who the chosen one was, everyone was stressed out. Even though they could switch bodies, their morale decreased every day. Ling had even doubted, at that time, that they would die of pressure rather than be killed by demons. But the teeming third border city injected new hopes into them. They started to discuss which restaurant had the best takeout food, and the lost past gradually came back to them. Even if there were no dream world, they would still be able to enjoy their life. This was so different from hundreds of years ago. Ling knew all the other witches felt the same way, and that was why they had such a high morale. They could not tolerate any erosions in the dream world. She thus leaped into the air, jumped right onto one fallen evils, and joined the battle. The moment Betty threw out the box, Roland dashed forward and struck the leader. Based on his past experience, Roland knew that it was very difficult to deal with the red and black area and the black tentacles generated by the magic creature. Even witches would find a hard time getting rid of them. However, the magic creature could not do any harm to Roland. As long as Roland held the leader back, the witches would finish the rest of the enemies off. As Roland had expected, Alpha could not escape from his clutch, and his contemptuous tone changed. I told you that I'm the creator," Roland cut across him, leaving him no chance to argue. He had already known what the leader was going to say. "I don't care whether you're an apostle or not. I don't give it a damn." Roland pushed the man down to the ground and punched him in the face over and over again while mumbling furiously under his breath, until the man's mask cracked and revealed the astrolabe underneath. The man's face was the core. Roland pulled out the astrolabe immediately. In a split second, the energy within him erupted from his palm and turned into a dazzling light beam that surrounded the astrolabe. As though attracted by the light beam, the cores of the fallen evils all fell off and splintered into thousands of glitters that gradually converged and lit the dark sky. Roland, once again, felt that this world was changing. However, this was not the end. The light beam became increasingly brighter and finally enveloped him. Roland felt that something was swarming into his head. An excruciating pain seared through him, and he almost lost his consciousness. His vision blurred, and everything in front of him was reduced to a snow screen that he usually saw on the television in 70s. He then heard hissing noises. On the static noise screen, Roland saw a large pit. Chapter 1241, God's Eye. "What's going on?" Roland tried to speak or move his body, but he was completely paralyzed. Several pictures fleeted in front of him. Numerous black dots paced back and forth around the pit like ants on the move. Slowly, a platform rose. However, compared to the giant pit, the platform was incredibly small, like a mound of earth. To Roland's surprise, he had seen buildings of the same material before. He had seen them on the mural in the Temple of the Cursed. Roland zoomed in screen with his mind, and the noises grew louder. The black dots turned into wriggly creatures, which were exactly the main character on the mural, the Radiation Clan. He suddenly remembered that this was exactly what the mural depicted. A dozen Radiation Clansmen ascended the platform while holding the god's relic. They encircled the platform, their bodies contracting and expanding alternatively, as if they were holding a kind of ceremony. Below the platform were thousands of match men, who were pushed into the fathomless pit before the celebrating Radiation Clan. The last piece of the relic was inserted, and the transparent crystal became complete. It emanated a dazzling glow and drifted toward the pit. Then it plunged and disappeared from the sight. Roland suddenly realized that this was probably what Lon called the bottomless land. But this was just the beginning. Roland's eye widened as he beheld the following scene. An orange light beam erupted from the pit and soared into the air. This was exactly what the ancient witches had described as the strange phenomenon upon entering the dream world, but the light beam was much more intense. A bloody moon hung in the sky right across where the erosion took place. For a split moment, the heaven and earth were connected, and Roland realized that the entrances to the so-called bottomless land and the erosion were simply the two ends of the light beam. The radiation clan swarmed toward the pit as flying moths darted into the fire. But they did not plummet into the abyss. Instead, they drifted off as if supported by something and rose to the sky. In an instant, there were innumerable black dots around the light beam. Is this the upgrade of a civilization? Clouds scud across the black dots and the light beam. Watching those black dots enter a new realm, Roland felt the whole upgrade process extraordinary. Nevertheless, a deep sigh interrupted his train of thought. The voice reverberated across his head, so clear that Roland was positive that it was not an illusion. Then time became seemingly faster, and the pixels on the screen became denser. The image changed drastically. Roland saw a few cities and towns dotted around the pit. Apparently, not all the members of the radiation clan were willing to enter the new world. Some preferred to stay. Probably, they feared the sky and the unknown adventure ahead of them. Roland did not know. He only saw several black dots disappear into the passage that connected the heaven and earth, like those legendary, audacious adventurers who set off for their journey. They looked, however, extremely lonely since most of their clansmen were already gone. Now, the light beam dimmed. In the end, it flickered and then vanished. The noise screen again occupied Roland's vision, which marked the end of the story. Roland speculated that peace would be restored eventually. The legend of the road to heaven would become a part of the history of the radiation clan, a written record for future reference. Perhaps, someone else would come to seek the pit and look for the upgrade method to reach God, but this would be something many years later. When Roland thought that this was the end, a towering wall suddenly appeared at the end of the horizon. At first, he had thought it was an illusion, since the noise screen blocked his vision. However, when the wall approached the pit gradually, he finally saw what that was. A huge wave taller than the impassable mountain range pressed in and submerged the little towns below instantly. The wave was so high that the top of it almost reached the clouds in the sky. Sun rays glazed off the wave and formed a new horizon. Roland could imagine how desperate the radiation clan were when they saw such a horrific scene. But the disaster did not stop here. After the tsunami, volcanoes at the distance suddenly erupted. Ashes were sent flying in all directions and dimmed the sunlight. Thunderbolts cracked through the air. Then there came heavy rain and harsh winter. The geographical movement became, unprecedentedly, active. After several major disastrous transformations, the world had transformed into an entirely different look. The screen started to hiss again. The image distorted, and the pixels almost filled out the whole screen. Before the scene vanished, Roland saw the glacier melt, and a green plant break through the soil and sprout. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty, are you all right?" Someone shook Roland and looked at him apprehensively. His eyes snapped open, and the pixels disappeared. He found himself again in the port area. "All done?" Roland mumbled as he studied his palm. Phyllis thought Roland was asking her, so she said, "Yes, we killed all of them. Not a single one fled. Their magic cores also disappeared a few minutes later. You stood rooted here like you've fallen asleep. Your Majesty, are you really okay?" Roland was not sure whether he was all right or not. All he had seen a moment ago did not seem like an illusion, for he could remember all of them. They were more like some extra memories coming out from nowhere. In addition, he felt extremely exhausted, as though he had lived thousands of years in just a few minutes. He somehow understood that sigh. Roland thought of Lan's words. The truth is always what you understand. Was this the last of the battle of divine will? Roland took a deep breath and said, I'm fine. I just saw some strange phenomena. Strange phenomena? Phyllis echoed while blinking. This isn't the time to say this, Your Majesty. The light beam just now almost lit half of the port and should have attracted a lot of attention. We must go. Otherwise, the association will notice us. Got it. Let's head back the way we came, Roland agreed with a nod. Roland was not sure whether those were the apostles' memories or something else, but he believed that one day, he would find the answer to these questions. And Roland believed that day would come soon. Chapter 1242, Departure from the Northernmost Port. At the northernmost port in the Kingdom of Everwinter. Don't push. Stand in line. Abandon the luggage. The King of Grey Castle will provide you with sufficient food and clothes. If you want to survive, throw your luggage into the water. Hurry up. Ladies and children first. The port was filled with refugees who were swarming toward the ships. Had the First Army and the Lord's Guards not maintained the order, those refugees would have probably trotted on each other to board the ships. Captain, we probably can't accommodate so many refugees, the chief guard said apprehensively as he looked backwards at the ships packed with refugees that were now slowly departing from the port. It's very brave of them to come to the northernmost port at this time of year, Uncle Sang commented as he gazed at the front. Within 3 to 4 days, the red mist had spread out from the crest of the impassable mountain range. The sky was awash with a crimson color, which cast a shadow over everybody's heart. Captain, save a spot for me, someone muttered. Uncle Sang said with a smile, if Nail asked me, I would definitely save a spot for him, even if that means I have to get off the ship. Over half a month ago, they had received instructions to leave the Hermes Plateau for the city at the far north of the Kingdom of Everwinter to carry out the immigration campaign. Compared to defend the Holy City, Nail preferred this task a lot better. He felt more relaxed after taking this mission and also became more communicative during the voyage. As soon as he reached the northernmost port, he started the campaign. They were not the first Grey Castle men that arrived at the Kingdom of Everwinter. Many of his colleagues had visited the kingdom and evacuated the cities ahead of time. The evacuation work did not go very well at first until the bloody moon emerged. Rumors were circulated among the community that the bloody moon represented the end of the world. Therefore, when local residents saw the crimson moon in the sky, they were terrified and immediately asked the soldiers stationed there to get them out of the city. Unfortunately, the situation turned for the worse. 4 or 5 days later, they were informed of the presence of the red mist. On the same day, the First Army encountered demons. They did know the outcome of the battle, but the advance team started to retreat to the south, and Nail's team also received instructions to retreat to the next port. In the meantime, there was a huge increase in the number of refugees. Hundreds of thousands of people rushed to the northernmost port every day and asked the soldiers to take them away. Nail could not ignore their pleading, so he asked his men to build up a defensive line while at the same time asking the army at the rear to send him more ships via the carrier pigeon. Because of this, their retreat plan was delayed for several days. Uncle Sang knew that once the news of the red mist was spread out, fewer ships would come to the north. Those chambers of commerce retained by His Majesty would not risk their own lives to carry out the mission. They would probably, very reluctantly, agree to sail out, but they would never reach here. These were probably the last ships that came to rescue. Nail had foreseen that this would happen beforehand, so he had asked his team members to prepare some explosives in advance. They could not only ignite the explosives in the event of an attack from the demons but could also destroy the equipment on the ship that was not easy to take away to prevent the demons from obtaining these technologies. Captain, there's smoke at the front, someone shouted. Again? Uncle Sang said. Everybody, man your post. Short-staffed, with no witch scouts to help them, they had to rely on the traditional means of communication to deliver messages. This was not the first time that the demons had visited the northernmost port. there were actually a few demons' bodies outside the town. According to the manual distributed by the management team, these demons were mostly mad demons. Although the enemies were scattered around and appeared not to be very powerful, it did indicate that the demons had set foot on the kingdom of Everwinter and that they were slowly approaching as the red mist permeated. As a troop that had been stationed at Hermes ever since the battle at the Cold Wind Ridge, Nail's unit did not participate in the Tequila battle. Although Uncle Sang had told him a lot about the war, this was, essentially, his first time to confront the demons. After several fights, Nail concluded that as long as the mad demons were more than 200 meters from the defensive line, they were easier to deal with than the church's God's punishment warriors. Uncle Sang was not too worried about the beacon. Instead, he was more concerned about Nail's decision. Without a doubt, it was impossible to take all the refugees away with only 2 ships. What would the captain do with the people left behind? Would he abandon them to their fate or take them to the south? Just then, he saw a mad demon outside the barbed wire erected on the street. Uncle Sang frowned. Like most of the port cities, the northernmost port did not have a city wall. Therefore, they had built the defensive line at the dock. Apart from refugees, all the residents were gone. Naturally, the city attracted demons. However, to Uncle Sang's dismay, the scouts were gone, too. Technically, they should have retreated after seeing the beacon and returned to the defensive line faster than the enemies. Gradually, more mad demons appeared and swarmed toward the dock. Fire! The 2 machine gun squads opened fire together, and shells rained down at the demons. The demons were swift too. They immediately took refuge in the buildings nearby. After the dust and smoke dissipated, there were only 2 bodies left on the barbed wire. Gunshots soon rented the air. Apparently, the sniper team opened fire at the demons who lurked on the roof. This was their military tactic. Considering that they did not have a broad view in the urban area, they had set up many obstacles over the past week. The soldiers had blocked most of the streets and alleys with garbage and property debris. These obstacles could not completely stop the demons but could hold them back. If the demons did not want to waste their time on removing obstacles and clearing the road, they would have to confront the machine gun squads directly. Then, they would face a bitter and ferocious fight. Since there were not many demons, Uncle Sang did not think that the demons would dart to the front and spear. The demons should have retreated considering they were outnumbered. However, they were sticking to this hide-and-seek game, as if they intended to exhaust the First Army's ammunition. The demons today were apparently more persistent than those a few days ago. It seemed that they had a lot of war experience. Uncle Sang sneered. Had the God's Punishment Army been so persistent, they would have had a difficult time. Nevertheless, the First Army was now better equipped. They had 100 soldiers, 4 Mark I machine guns, and ammunition that could last at least 1 day. Uncle Sang was sure that the demons would end up dying here if things continued like that. However, the situation suddenly changed. With a loud bang, dust was stirred up in the residential area in the north of the dock. A huge armored monster broke through the stone walls and rose on its rear from the debris. "Spider Demon," a soldier asked in surprise. "Load the anti-demon grenade." Uncle Sang's heart sank. The manual did mention a type of demon that resembled a spider. However, this demon was a little different from the spider demon he knew. Its limbs were covered with much thicker black stones that almost took up half of its body. Chapter 1243, Rescue. 2 soldiers immediately approached the new enemy and fired the anti-demon grenade. 2 strands of smoke shot toward the gigantic spider demon from behind the bunk. They could not miss such a large target. Uncle Sang's heart leaped to his throat as he watched the trajectories of the 2 shells. For some reason, he had an undefined feeling that the thick armor the demon was wearing was not that easy to deal with. He was right. 1 grenade hit the target and was bounced off into the ground. The other one hit the demon's front leg and exploded. Nevertheless, the demon was not stopped at all. On the contrary, it leaned a little forward and strode in their direction against the dust. Shot the body, you thickhead, someone complained. Let me try. Another soldier volunteered, who carried a box of shells and crept out of the trench. Uncle Sang did not stop him, but he was not as optimistic as the others. Now he came to the realization why the new spider demon looked somewhat strange to him. Compared to the misshapen spider demon on the manual, this one looked more coordinated. The armor it was wearing was not made of random irregular-shaped stones, but neat polygons. If those stones were connected, they could probably form a perfect trapezoid. Also, its limbs swung on its side when it walked, which made it harder for the soldiers to shoot its torso or abdomen. No wonder the two previous shots had missed the target. As Uncle Sang had expected, the next few shots did not stop the spider demon either. The demon almost automatically curled up the moment the soldiers fired. In the meantime, mad demons appeared again in the rupture created by the spider demon. Damn it. Can't those guys be more serious? A machine gunner complained as he adjusted the muzzle. Enough! Uncle Sang yelled briskly. Retreat to the second defensive line and abandon this area. Prepare to ignite the explosives. But... Shut up, Uncle Sang hollered. If the demons besiege us from the side, we'll be stuck here. Horns trumpeted across the battlement. Nail's team retreated to the port according to the training procedure. The refugees panicked as the monsters slowly approached them. The soldier responsible for igniting the explosives connected the detonating cord to the motor and set the motor in motion. Captain, we're ready. Very well. Let them have a taste of the explosives, Uncle Sang said as he stared at the monster that clashed in every direction and motioned. Just a moment, now. As the soldier pressed the lever, there was a huge roar. In an instant, the ground beneath started to quaver. The air was impregnated with smoke and dust. Some explosives had been buried underneath the spider demon. The spider demon was thus sent flying into the air, and its stone armor became a huge burden. Its joints snapped under the impact. By the time it fell, it had been completely immobilized. Limped and seriously injured, it collapsed to the ground. Someone in the battlement whistled. Before they could take a break, another bang occurred in the east of the dock. Another spider demon emerged on the battlefield. Uncle Sang was glad that he had made the right decision. He had a vague feeling that the attack of the demons this time might be very different from the previous attacks. Apparently, the demons intended to besiege and eliminate them. The fact that the scouts did not come back in time indicated that the demons had cut their retreat. Had he been hesitant a moment ago, the machine gun squads would have failed to retreat. Although the First Army had now abandoned their stronghold in the alley, they could still rely on 4 Mark I HMGs to repulse the mad demons. However, this did not mean that the crisis had been resolved. They never knew how many spider demons there would be. If there were 2 more, no, 1 more spider demon, they could hardly hold on to the battlement. What was worse was that many refugees were waiting for the departure at the dock. If the battle sparked panic among them, the whole situation would get out of hand. They would not only be unable to save these people but would fail to board the ships as well. After the smoke dissipated, the demons stepped forward onto the field where the explosion had just taken place. Numerous gunshots rented the air. Boom! While Uncle Sang was worried about what step he should take next, he suddenly heard a familiar roar behind him. Immediately, he knew where that sound came from. This was the sound of the 152 caliber longsong cannon that the First Army was most familiar with. There should not have been any artillery here. Uncle Sang turned around in dismay and saw an iron ship slowly dock. The cannon parallel to the deck was directly aiming at the defensive line. That's the Roland, a soldier, who recognized the iron ship at once, exclaimed. Didn't they leave already? Who cares? We have support. Long live the king! Kill those filthy monsters! Shells brushed past the soldiers and landed on the battlefield in succession. Around 10 meters away from the trench, smoke and dust permeated the air. Some shells hit the sandbags before the trench and exhaled a rain of sand and earth that showered down at the soldiers. The soldiers would have loathed the artillery battalion with the most venomous words had it occurred in the past. However, now, everyone appreciated their help. The roar of the long-song cannon became the most beautiful music they had ever heard. Had Nail not abandoned them but been awaiting this moment all along? Uncle Sang noticed that some refugees, under the guidance of the soldiers, boarded the Roland. Most of the refugees got on the ship. He did not know what Nail had said to the management team, but evidently, this was a good opportunity for them to withdraw. Everyone, listen. We have to go to the dock, Uncle Sang yelled. One by one. Don't fall behind. Once everyone leaves, the explosion unit should ignite the rest of the explosives. Soon, the order was delivered and spread out throughout the whole trench. They started their final retreat. Although quite reluctant, they had to leave the Mark I type HMG and the rest of the ammunition behind. This was the King's order. Personal safety took precedence over weapons, for soldiers could always create new weapons. The troop thus entered the dock area, and the demons, in the meantime, also took the second defensive line against the gunfire. But no sooner had the demons snatched their victory than an ear-splitting roar shook them. Thousands of kilograms of explosives sent the mad demons into the air. In the aftermath of the magnificent explosion, the Roland whistled and departed from the ravaged northernmost port at a full speed. Chapter 1244, Change Over Time. Zoe stood at the bridge and peered down at the crowd on the deck. The Roland was not large enough to accommodate 1,000 people. After all the refugees boarded the ship, there was literally no room to sit. For most of the refugees, it was their first time traveling by sea, and they soon felt nauseous and dizzy. The crowded environment further aggravated the situation. Even those who rarely got seasick felt their stomachs turn uncomfortably when surrounded by sick passengers. Zoe appreciated the fact that she could not smell anything. Mortals are so weak. Carol's voice came from behind. I can't believe that we used to be like that too. Yes, that's incredible, Zoe said with a nod of approval. She knew what Carol was referring to. After the captain had received the instructions to support the army, he had immediately sought the gods' punishment witches for help. Since the main task for the Roland was to locate the god's stone mine, Zoe was the decision-maker. The magic core from the underground civilization was, at that time, on the ship, and its giant frame almost occupied the entire deck, so there was not much room for more passengers. Zoe should have declined the request to avoid creating potential safety hazards. She would have refused to provide assistance had this occurred in the Union Age, for back then, the rare magic core had been far more important than mortals. She would choose the magic core over a city without the slightest hesitation, let alone taking refugees. However, now, things were a little different. After having a brief discussion with her peers, Zoe made a decision that even astonished herself. She shipped the magic core to another port city and asked the First Army who garrisoned there to look after it. Then she steered the Roland back to the northernmost port. She had even told the garrison that if she did not return in a timely manner, they should take the responsibility of sending the core back to Neverwinter themselves. But it doesn't feel bad, Carol said smilingly while shrugging. To be honest, I thought you would decline the request, and I was torn too. I hope they won't fail His Majesty, Zoe said darkly. What had changed their mind? Zoe searched her memories and remembered the First Army who had fought ferociously against the demons at the ruins of the Holy City, the nurses who had treated her in the hospital, the ordinary people in the dream world who looked no different than the witches, as well as Roland Wimbledon. I hope so. We risked ourselves coming here to this area permeated with the red mist, Carol said as she patted Zoe on the shoulder, and then headed to the bridge. Anyway, we completed our mission. I want to go back to Neverwinter immediately and have spicy hot pot. Oh, my mouth waters. So did Zoe's. She heard her stomach protest. Fortunately, Carol shut the gate just at that time and therefore did not hear the noise. Zoe cleared her mind and gazed upon the sinister red mist at the distance. The battle of Divine Will that had brought the Union numerous nightmares came once again, much earlier than they had anticipated. The demons had also achieved great progress, but somehow, Zoe felt peaceful. This time, they were not fighting alone. Hacksword was suspended above the city he had just occupied. There was no smoke or ruins of properties. Most buildings remained intact as if the battle had not taken place. Human beings hardly resisted. They were even weaker than 400 years ago. Had he not trusted Ursruk so much, he would have thought that this was the territory of the enemies in the Sky-Sea realm rather than human beings. Within 1 week, their army had advanced several hundred miles and also built their outpost in the cities not yet permeated with the red mist. Hacksword had to attribute the swift operation to the help of the mankind. According to his subordinates, they had only decapitated hundreds of people before the frightened lord, and the nobles knuckled under and agreed to provide supplies to them. It was just like the first battle of divine will. It appeared that the news that they had burned the Snow Reflection Castle had already been spread out and made a deep impression on other lords. As more and more cities were conquered, Hacksword gradually received a lot of information from local people. He did not understand why the mankind, who had united together back in the Union Age, was again scattered. He did not understand either that why humans' territory, small as it was further divided into 4 kingdoms that never communicated with each other. The union that had once dominated the continent was gone. What had men achieved in the past 400 years? The 4 kingdoms were not weak in his opinion, for his best commander had been killed by men. Did they not know the importance of teamwork? Yet anyhow, Hacksword was relieved. He had successfully carried out the plan for the Western Front, although he had experienced some hiccups. He had successfully activated the birth tower as the king expected him to. In a way, he was much more reliable than the boasting bloody conqueror and the irresponsible mask. At least, he had fulfilled his promise. Through a series of distortion doors, Hacksword returned to the rupture. This was the last stronghold on the Land of Dawn, and Hacksword had decided to name this prospective city Sky after him. He was sure that this new city would be remembered by the whole clan. Just at that moment, his guards sent in the update report. Hacksword quickly skimmed the report through and noticed that a large number of refugees began to flee the kingdom of Everwinter. He would not have paid it particular notice had those people been regular refugees, for most of them would die on their way. However, to him, it seemed to be a well-organized, carefully planned campaign. All the refugees were heading to the kingdom of Wolfheart in the south by water or land. The troops who attempted to stop them had experienced fierce resistance, which was very similar to what Usruk had mentioned in his letter. Although several units led by the upgraded had gained the victory, they had not completely stopped the refugees. More troops were needed to stop them. This was also one of the drawbacks to erect the birth tower in the mountainous area. Without the distortion doors, the junior demons and inferior demons could not travel to men's territory by themselves. Hacksword knitted his brows and asked, "Where's Nightmare?" "Her Excellency is still asleep in the Red Mist Pond." "Damn it. She has been there for more than 10 days. I hope she's not lost in the realm of mind," thought Hacksword to himself. Hacksword summoned the distortion door and went straight down to the bottom of the rupture. Valkyrie still remained in her original position. She was sitting cross-legged in the pond, looking quite relaxed. There was not the faintest sign of her being devoured by the realm of mind, except that she had been there for an exceptionally long time. This indicated that she was still roaming the sea of mind. Had the person in front of him been the bloody conqueror, Hacksword would have given him a slap in the face to wake him up. He did not mind that this action would cause damage to the bloody conqueror's memory, but he would not reckless do the same thing to the Nightmare. Why did she have to pick this time to explore the realm of mind? Hacksword felt a little agitated about those fleeing refugees. Dimly, he was aware that something fishy was going on, but it was hard to explain the situation to the king. The king had dispatched 2 senior lords to the Western Front already, so it was not likely that he would send another one simply to deal with these low lives. The other senior lords would definitely laugh at him if he requested for one more. However, the truth was that he had made every effort to conduct this operation, but the senior lords could not care less about this mission. The senior lords simply acted on their own and provided little help to the battle. Therefore, due to the lack of a reliable senior lord at the Western Front to properly command the troops, the army was unable to carry out an expedition. Had Nightmare assisted him in pursuing those refugees, he would not have run into such an embarrassing and difficult situation. Hacksword glared at the sleeping Nightmare and finally left the Red Mist Pond. It seemed that he had to guard the Western Front himself. Chapter 1245, The Great Immigration. At the Sedimentation Bay in the Kingdom of Wolfheart, White drove his wagon into the busy dock area. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at our destination. No matter what life you used to lead, you'll have a brand new life from today onwards. I wish every one of you good luck. It has been a privilege being of your service. Now, I can offer you one more additional service as a courtesy," White said as he reined in his horse. His business had been pretty good recently. After the arrival of the Grey Castle ships, he had obtained more business opportunities, especially of short-distance transportation services. Every time he transported residents in the surrounding towns and cities to the port, he could earn around 10 silver royals, and normally, he could do that twice a day. He could have offered another ride at night had he not cared too much about the condition of his wagon. In that case, he would actually earn a little bit more than what he had got back in the church. Further, the compensation was not paid by the passengers but by the Grey Castle men. He only needed to stamp on the traveling document before he proceeded to the sentry post to request for his remuneration. The compensation was based on the number of the passengers he carried, and the Grey Castle men had never delayed any payment. Because of this, many people at the Sedimentation Bay started to provide similar transportation services, including sailors and handymen. Even though a lot of them did not know how to maneuver a carriage, they could ask someone who did to join them. The service was in such a high demand that they did not really need to worry about attracting customers. It was a job that allowed people to earn quick money. The only factor they needed to consider about was the traveling distance, as the farther the towns were, the higher expenses it would incur. Grey Castle men would like to offer help to anyone who was willing to leave the Kingdom of Wolfheart, both rich and poor. Apparently, the King of Grey Castle did not really care about money. White thus did not want to lose such a lucrative business opportunity. Everybody loved money. White had also heard of the war in the north. There was suddenly a huge influx of refugees in the Kingdom of Wolfheart, so the rumor could possibly be true. Also, Smarty had told him that the Lord of the Sedimentation Bay, Baron Jean Bate, transferred a large number of his personal properties to a ship, in an apparent attempt to leave this place. In consideration of these recent events, White also had to find a retreat for himself. If he could earn a huge sum of money now, he would be able to live a better life in the future. "What kind of service?" someone asked immediately. "Some useful experience and kind advice," White answered as he pointed at the port where a great number of large ships docked. "Look over there. Although everyone wants to leave for Grey Castle, not everyone will have a pleasant journey. I had been at the Sedimentation Bay before they came here, so I know a lot. Perhaps, my advice could help you." "Then, please tell us." "Sure, but you have to pay me." "Not much. 1 silver royal would do." White knew poor people did not really care about what kind of situation they were venturing into. They only needed to be fed and clothed. Therefore, he mainly targeted refugees who had a little bit of savings. They loved to hear little tips and advice. Since White did not charge much, and they did not even pay for the ride, they did not mind buying the information. Because White used to be that kind of person too. "Ha, that's a game that rats normally play," a well-dressed man with brown hair sneered. "But this man is obviously not as daring as rats. 1 silver royal only. Here you go." Soon, the servant beside the man handed White the money. White smiled stiffly. It appeared that the man was a noble, a diminished noble actually, for he had to now share a wagon with civilians. "Here's my payment," another young man said hesitantly and produced a silver royal from his pocket. White waited for a while. It appeared that only 2 people were willing to pay, but it was better than nothing. He then decided to let the customers go. Just at that moment, the young man said to the other passengers, "Don't go just yet. I'll share the information with you for free." "Hey, what did you say?" White stiffened. "I paid," the young man swelled up. "I paid for your information, but it doesn't mean I can't retell it to someone else." "What? Anything wrong here?" You probably want to bail out, but you won't benefit anything from it. Even if I share the information to everyone at the port, it won't affect your future business. However, you'll lose 1 silver royal if you choose not to say." White's lips parted. He suddenly did not know how to respond to such a sharp argument. "You thickhead. You can do whatever you want. Why did you tell him?" the noble protested irritably. "You're wasting our time. I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to hold back," the young man said flatly. "I think it's unfair not to let the coachman know." "Fair," the noble echoed while casting a scornful glance at the young man as he looked at a fool, and then turned to White. "Oi, leave that man alone. I paid you. Are you telling me or not?" White glared at the young man. He had to admit that the young man was right. All right. I'll say." "What bad luck, you guys stay here. I'll tell you all." Then White related the information he knew to his passengers. He told them what kind of people Grey Castle men preferred, the departure time of the ships, some details they needed to pay attention to upon registration, as well as the second screening after their arrival. White particularly placed emphasis on the second screening process, for this was the information he had obtained from the soldiers and that the guide of the First Army would not reiterate. According to the Grey Castle men, witches would partake in the second screening to detect lies. Once a person misrepresented in his application, he would be labeled as a dishonest man, and it would be a lot harder for him to find a decent job. Apart from that, the noble status would not give them any privilege. On the contrary, people in Grey Castle hated those who always boasted about their noble status, so it would be more advisable to keep a low profile. As long as one could read and write, or have a specific skill, he did not need to worry about his life there. "Thank you for your kind reminders," the young man said to White as he got off the coach at last. "This did save us a lot of trouble." "Bah, don't mention it. You paid me," White grumbled and smoked his pipe deeply. "Those people should thank you, but they're all gone." "Young man, don't always try to be nice, especially nowadays. Otherwise, people will take advantage of you someday. He used to be like that too." However, he had got nothing for being nice but only a fake leg. "Perhaps, but this is my duty as a knight." "Ha, do you think I've never seen a knight? Or are you saying the knight on a book?" "Forget it. The last time I've heard of a knight was when I drank with a rat in a tavern. Everyone doing it doesn't mean it's right." "Yes?" White said as he raised his brows. The man looked serious. "Are you a knight?" "No, I'm not knighted, but my father was, but he..." White gave the young man a look of comprehension. He now understood that this man had nothing but an ambitious dream. White waved his hand and said, "I'm not interested in your family. By the way, what's your name?" The young man immediately raised his head and replied, "Manfeld Castian." "Okay, Mr. Castian," White said as he exhaled a pipe of smoke and clambered onto the horseback. "An additional piece of information for you. There's no knight in Grey Castle anymore." Chapter 1246, The Ship to the South. As White had suggested, Manfeld found that nobody waited for him after the coach departed. He was surrounded by strangers. However, he did not feel very frustrated about the lack of appreciation because he did that simply because that he thought this was the right thing to do. Manfeld soon found the registration desk based on the information provided by the coachman. In fact, a banner was hung over that area, which attracted many passers-by. Although there were lots of people, the registration proceeded in an orderly fashion. Iron bars segmented the crowd, and there formed a huge lineup between the entrance and the registration desk. Refugees were thus directed into a temporary passage, along which they shuffled forward slowly. A Grey Castle soldier received Manfeld. All the clerks were wearing the same uniform, so it was easy to distinguish them. Name? Manfeld Castian. Identity? Any criminal records? What's your expertise? The inquiry was just as what the coachman had told him. Manfeld answered all the questions truthfully and did not dwell upon his family and background. He was about to talk more about his expertise when the soldier suddenly interrupted him after hearing him say he could read and write. That'll do. Trestle number 6. This is your boarding pass. Don't lose it. Next. Manfeld was immediately pushed out of the queue into the dock area before he realized that the registration was over. Well, that's it? So the coachman was right then? One could live a very good life in Grey Castle as long as he could read and write. But it appeared that everyone in Grey Castle was literate. Manfeld had noticed that while he was waiting, the registration clerks were changing all the time. Sometimes, they would ask a soldier who maintained the order to take their shift temporarily, and nothing had gone wrong. Manfeld felt very confused. Also, the boarding pass was a little strange too. It was an iron plate, with a rope attached to one end so that he could actually wear it like a necklace. There was a series of engraved symbols and numbers on the plate. It would not cost much to make such a small plate, but it would be a different story if every refugee had such a plate. Castian's family used to own a blacksmith workshop, so he knew what that meant. A blacksmith could use leftover materials to make an iron plate, but he would need tons of materials to make 100 or 1,000 of them. It would only take a blacksmith half a day to engrave those symbols, but it would take a much longer time to repeat the same process over and over again. However, there were more than 1,000 people at the port. If this was what happened at the sedimentation bay every day, then they would need hundreds of thousands of iron plates. It was unimaginable how many resources and how much time they would need to distribute an iron plate like this to every single refugee. It would probably still not enough even if they summoned all the blacksmith in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Manfeld now had a glimpse of Grey Castle's immense wealth. Kingdom of Dawn used to be the wealthiest kingdom on this continent. Amazed and surprised, Manfeld boarded a 3-masted ship. He was led into a cabin shared by 10 people, which was a lot better than what he had expected. He had thought that he might have to sleep in a warehouse. Manfeld was not sure if this was because he could read and write. Nevertheless, the stinky smell in the cabin was intolerable. Although his family had lost their past glory, he used to, at least, sleep in a comfortable bedroom. Therefore, Manfeld immediately got out of the cabin and went to the deck to get some fresh air. Just at that moment, he heard someone calling for help. The voice seemed to be coming from the end of the hallway. Since not many people were on the ship and the sailors were busy working on the upper deck, the cabin was a little empty. Nobody except him had heard that voice. Manfeld thus went in the direction that voice came from. There was a storage room at the end of the hallway, and Manfeld gathered that few people except crew members would come here. He pressed his face onto the door and heard noises inside, as though someone was struggling. Manfeld soon stepped back and threw himself against the door. The door was flung open. Manfeld was taken aback by what he saw. He did not expect to see a familiar face here. The middle-aged noble whom he had met in the coach was standing in the storage room while his 2 servants were trying to push 2 ladies down to the ground and tie them up. The ladies were gagged. Inarticulate groans escaped from their lips. Apparently, they were brought here by force. "Hey, isn't this the righteous fool on the coach?" the noble drawled. "If I remember correctly, you're a noble as well, right?" "I'm McKinley." "What about you?" Manfeld Castian. Manfeld pronounced his name for the 3rd time. He noticed that as soon as he announced his name, the hope in the ladies' eyes faded out, and they also stopped struggling. "Castian? I've never heard of this name," the middle-aged man said while shrugging. "But you're lucky. Since you came here, I'll kindly share the ladies with you, but you'll have to wait." "Release them," Manfeld said heavily. "Huh?" McKinley squinted and said, "Are you out of your freaking mind? Do you know who they are? They're slaves. And God knows how many people have used them. I'm very surprised that I found these two little things on the ship. There's no reason that their master would let them go. So, now, it's very simple. They escaped from their master. You still want to save them? Escaped slaves were the most inferior slaves, who were not very different from animals. Therefore, nobles could literally do anything to them. However, Manfeld had his own principles. Everyone doing it doesn't mean it's right. This ship is heading to Grey Castle, right? What's your point? Mick Kinley snarled. You should have heard what those Grey Castle men said. The Wimbledons has abolished slavery. Therefore, the moment they boarded ship, they were no longer slaves, Manfeld insisted defiantly. And don't you forget that there's a second screening after we get off the ship. They'll ask you whether you have criminal records. If I tell you what you did on the ship to these two ladies, do you think Grey Castle men would let you go? What are you going to do if I insist? Mick Kinley said through his clenched teeth. You have to beat me first, Manfeld said as he rolled up his sleeves. I'm a knight. No sooner had he finished than Mick Kinley threw himself toward him. It was a quick battle. Mick Kinley's servants had apparently also received formal training. Manfeld was soon impaled in the small, narrow storage room. Mick Kinley kicked his bruised face. This is all you can do? I thought your swords are as sharp as your words, Mick Kinley spatted. Shit. Such bad luck. I'll leave these two sluts to you, but don't you forget that slaves will always be slaves, no matter where they go. What a fool. Let's go. Mick Kinley slammed the door behind him, and the next moment, the three impaled were left alone in the stuffy storage room.